Right, but you're only referencing right back to the Civil Rights era, which is in 1964, which I've actually heard members of the black community that are older that actually have argued that the black community was much better off whenever it was segregated, because at least then people knew what side of the street to walk on, and because of that, those communities kept their own money inside their own community, and that's when they started to be able to be.
Did you hear that shit?
Where you're attempting to control me and my brain.
Critically is one way to explain the type you're thinking, the way you're thinking.
I'll tell you, paints the broadest of brushes possible.
Okay, so I very specifically
What an
would say
asshole!
that even like the argument I'm.
Rose Wrist, welcome.
Hello, hello.
Oh,
For you.
I'm doing phenomenally. How about yourself?
I'm doing outstanding. So, let's preface this conversation with the more
Are you ready, chat?
perfect union and so wobbly are going to be serving as moderators and moderators only, gentlemen, in this conversation.
Copy.
I know.
Sure.
Yeah, I know. You guys love participating, but this is Rose asked specifically for a conversation about systemic racism in the United States. So we're going to have a conversation, not a debate, right, Rose?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a discussion, depending on how much we disagree. Obviously, it might be characterized as more of a debate or conversation, but yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Well, conversations mean you're keeping your mind open and you're not just arguing rhetorical points.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm going to. I've thought I'm gonna do a more of a logically sound, fairly like simple argument. I suppose that's hard to disagree with, to make sure that there isn't, as much to minimize the potential for hostility. But yeah, there is one thing though.
Anybody know Rose Wrist?
I wasn't quite aware that we were gonna have moderators, and obviously I don't know who these people are. In the DMs you said one-on-one, but I'm sure it'll work out fine. And if it
I know, right? What the fuck is this moderator shit? CTV. CTV likes to yell and talk and act like a badass, but he ain't shit in a debate. Okay? And like, he's scared. He needs the moderators, right? To get him out of a bad situation. If shit starts going south, he can just accuse bad faith. You were talking too much. You were talking over me. CTV, it's like really funny that CTV ever can accuse anybody else of like talking over. Do you know what I mean? You can't really be CTV and make that criticism. That's like being Freddy Krueger and telling other people that they're violent. I mean, maybe they're a little bit violent, but you're Freddy Krueger. Okay? So what I'm saying is that CTV is the Freddy Krueger of interrupting people. The nightmare that never stops.
If it doesn't, then I'll just let you know if the moderation is if it's something
that's what I wanted to do. Yeah, I've got some old CTV clips that I wanted to put up on the Spice channel.
We kind of got our own show going right now. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah. So this is where you work on the fly.
I see. All right. Well, I think we can make it work.
I feel very big.
So
should we do?
I feel very big. Stick with me, kid, and you'll make it big energy here. You know what I mean? Let me tell you about the business, kid.
Please first, and I'll do the same for your chat. I'm assuming you've got your stream up and you're running.
Yep, of course.
So we'll give you the floor first. Let everybody here in the Wolf's Den, right? Let everybody know who you are.
The Wolf's Den, sponsored by Dylan Burns.
Where you're from, what you're about. That way they kind of got an idea who they're talking to.
Yep. Hello, everybody. My name is Rose Wrist. I am a Swedish sort of progressive political content creator mostly. I'm very progressive typically. I mostly focus, and more of the stuff that I've done that has gotten more recognition on the internet when it comes to politics is the research documents I've produced. I've done some on Sweden and immigration, on systemic racism in the US, on the effects of worker cooperatives in an economy, and a number of other things. And typically, I like doing debates. I do videos. I'm on YouTube, Twitch. I have a website, all under, Rose Wrist. My website would be rosewrist.com. And yeah, I'm excited to have a nice, good faith conversation with critically thinking veteran about the existence of systemic racism in the United States of America.
Outstanding. And for everybody listening on Rose Wrist side, I am critically thinking veteran. I served 9 years aboard Ohio class submarines.
Does anybody know Rose Wrist, he, him pronouns? Is that correct?
Have traveled to 45 of the 50 states of the United States, and I've also been to Germany, England, Scotland, and Wales. So I've been around a little bit, talked to people from all over the world.
He's a real Renaissance man,
extensive
honestly.
Research and into United States history specifically, because American,
America.
Mhm.
and the systems
America.
of government that we have in place, and have been involved in the online sphere in this capacity for only like the last 10 months,
Mhm.
and only been streaming consistently since January. So
I see.
that's me in a nutshell. I would say the best community on Twitch, hands down. I love my wolf pack, and we're always going around having discussions with people that want to have actual discussions. And you know what? We even have debates too, but not as say laxed and open-minded during those times, because debating with lefties tends to be a little bit more combative.
Mhm.
That said, though, I'm looking forward to the discussion today. So, Rose, since you do not currently possess home field advantage, we're going to let you kind of take us away.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, so
Wonderful.
what we're here today to discuss is, from my understanding at least, the existence of systemic racism in the United States of America. And when you have these discussions, there are sort of two key different, I would say, sources or maybe aspects of systemic racism as per, like my definition of it. And, I would define systemic racism as systemic factors within the societal constructs of the United States of America working together in order to
Okay.
produce racially disparate outcomes. There are two key aspects that I sort of want to talk about. I mainly want to focus on the first one because I think that that's the major one, that's the most important one. And then there's a second one, which I feel like most other people focus on, and I'm not quite sure why. The first one I want to focus on is more of an argument or that can be made even presupposing that there are no more explicitly racially biased structures that exist in the United States today. And the argument sort of hinges most, notably on discrimination that existed in the past and the way that's influencing the United States of America and the experience of Black Americans today. The second aspect of that are sort of factors that still continuously work to perpetuate and grow the existing, racial gap when it comes to wealth, for instance. But that's a lot more minor than just like generalized one, which is more of an outcome of discrimination in the past. And yeah, with that out of the way, I'm going to hand it over to you. Critically thinking better.
Well, the definition that you gave seems kind of broad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so broad, in fact, that to me, it just speaks to the broadest language possible so that a label can be used to try to narrowly paint something without it actually being able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it seems like. So maybe expand a little bit more on the very particular things that you think would be examples of that.
Yeah, so what we can really do is, I was prepared to this from the beginning, I'm sort of less concerned on the specific title of systemic racism, more so much as I am concerned about whether you and I can agree that the sort of aspects and the constructs that, at least per my definition, make up systemic racism exist. That's the sort of core element to it. So I'm less concerned in, if we both agree with everything that I have to say and every sort of societal mechanism that I explained to you, but for some reason we don't disagree on whether or not this is defined as systemic racism or not, as long as we agree that that exists and that that's something that we should, do something for, I really couldn't care less explicitly what we define it as and what label we place on top of it, more than I do about the actual subject matter. Do you have any disagreements with that, or can I go into the more argument side of explaining this?
No. I mean, you wanted to have the conversation specifically, so I am going to listen until I have something to really kind of ping you on. You know what
All
I
right,
mean?
wonderful. Yeah, okay. So the first argument I'm going to lay forth is, made up of a few premises, and then I believe at least that they work together in a rational manner to produce the conclusion that by virtue of largely unaddressed racist treatment in the past, Black Americans face relatively poor outcomes in the current day in comparison to other racial groups. So these premises, I'm going to go through them one by one, and then you can say if you disagree or agree with them, and then we
seems
can
a bit
talk about it if we disagree or
unprepared.
just move past it if we agree, and then kind of build on that. The first premise is that Black Americans experienced significant discrimination in the past. We both agree on this, right?
Famously, CDV called me no viewers chick, right? When I was doing a debate stream, you know, of the Hippy Dippy outside of the normal hours that I streamed. And as soon as he did, I laid into him with a few things. And like the space of, I don't know, 15 minutes, I reversed that. I got Dylan's crowd loves to see CTV get his ass kicked. And that was happening. But I think there's an understanding amongst like a lot of the debaters that CTV's Dylan's special boy, and you're not supposed to break his special boy. You're supposed to kind of go easy on him, you know, because he's got to last, right? But yeah, like the crowd fucking loves it when you put CTV in his place. And soon enough, like there were just like people that never been in my stream before that were just like in there, like donating, following. It was just like, it was pretty wild because, you know, like you love to see hubris. You love to see hubris get its face pushed down into the fucking mud. It's beautiful. It's a really great thing. And I loved being a part of that. Yeah, I can't be a part of that anymore because that's like apparently not supposed to happen. The thing that the audience like loves to see most is like kind of forbidden. So
Yeah, in the past, that's pretty broad.
All right, wonderful. The discrimination that Black Americans experienced in the past has had a dramatic effect on their wealth, especially their wealth relative to other racial groups in the United States of America. Do we both agree on this?
No, I wouldn't say that those things are specifically tied to race. I would say that more of that has to do with something that can't actually be measured by a study or a statistic, right?
the other thing to remember with CTV is that he likes to debate either stoned or drunk or both. And so you kind of don't know what you're going to get.
Because the reasons or justifications that people give for the types of choices that they make
Stands for
in their
crossfaded,
life are
yeah.
entirely their
Crossfaded
own.
thinking
Because
that.
of that, right? Like you can look and say, well, you know,
But yeah, sometimes he just like is like so out of it.
Black community, as your example points out, is not being as successful as other communities, right?
Mhm.
So then like there's an attempt to justify that through, say, like the generational thing of, you know, going back to chattel slavery during the Civil War back to the British, right, where it was actually brought to the continent.
Mhm.
Like you could make an argument there, but then like how does the opportunities, say, across the entire community, which frankly would be across the entire country, not just like maybe specific parts of it where they had Jim Crow laws or, you know, other things that were put on the books that we already overcame with regard to the Civil Rights Act, right? Like that right there of itself doesn't allow for the painting of the broadest brush possible, and you'd have to get very specific into certain communities. And then once you got into those certain communities, you're most definitely going to have to address, say, local policy with regard to you know, the policing or and what I would.
So notice that like his first impulse is to get sus about, I guess he's talking about the governments, the elected governments in like black cities. This is kind of a preoccupation with a lot of conservatives, right? Their solution to a city that's mostly black and that's experiencing some kind of trouble, whether it be crime or poverty, is to blame the black government and suggest that something else should be instituted on top of that government, right? And like this has happened in Detroit. The governor's actually like overridden city authority and imposed like a manager over the city. Like this has actually been done, but like this seems to be kind of where CTV's going with this here. And like when he said the police, I don't think that he's talking about police reform, right? I think he's talking about
probably end up saying it's like how the government would
more police to arrest more people, then you'll have a better community.
Start to limit the civil liberties of the people, regardless of their skin color.
Oh my God, am I even allowed to say that? Oh my God.
And then because of that, it allows for individual bias to be able to come in to this system by way.
I'll get arrested by Dylan's anti-SJW secret police.
Of prosecutorial discretion of the police officers at the scenes.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about this for a minute. So just a reminder that the thing we're key like specifying here and that we're discussing here is whether or not this discrimination had a dramatic effect on wealth. So one of the first things you mentioned here was that it has to do something with something that is immeasurable and can't be found through studies and statistics. What it seems to me like you are...
Honestly, though, chat, we're in luck tonight because we're getting a CTV who's fairly cogent, fairly understandable, versus the normal shit that comes out of his mouth.
Sort of like you're implying, or that you're explaining this because is personal decision making, right? So the personal decision making of the individuals that make up these broad racial groups or any other, you know, minority or majority groups we talk about in society. And while I agree that personal decision making most definitely has a result and an effect on people's well-being, we do also recognize society, and I think you would even recognize this if we talk about this for a minute, that the environment in which you are able and in which you are influenced to make certain decisions are massively important to your outcomes, and especially to the outcomes of vast group of people.
Right, like he famously was after the last Hippy Dippy.
So, for instance, if we look at, for example, some of the aspects of this...
I would say, though, that again is still painting with the broadest of brush and doesn't allow for individuals that are motivated to be able to take advantage of opportunities that are laid right there in front of them.
Sure.
This is why painting like the entire...
I mean, I guess we're not seeing his view, chat. So he was streaming, okay? So, like, whatever he was doing, I think he was doing on stream. Yeah, like, I feel like we just got moved to a slightly more inebriated CTV.
Community or an entire group of people would just be a mischaracterization from the start, because how do you explain then the people that were able to say, get PhDs and become doctors, or, get, lawyer degrees, or any one of these number of, individuals were able to overcome that, right? How do you explain that?
Well, number one, it's not any number. It would be a minority compared to an aggregate, right? But if we work on this for a second, so if we talk about discrimination,
I
for
like
instance,
pointing out
one of the ways
language,
in which Black Americans were discriminated against, not
like
too
any
long ago,
number
by the
of
way, I mean,
doesn't
the
really
Civil
mean
Rights Act
anything.
didn't even pass. It's been less than 100 years since its passing. Was, for example,
1964.
Yeah, less than 100 years. Which
this is
I
debate
don't know,
bro
how many
culture.
generations,
This
like
is fuck.
maybe
Look,
two,
look.
three
This is what sucks about debate bro culture. Does somebody knowing the year mean they're more likely to be right? No. That's a random fucking fact. That actually doesn't have any bearing here. But the debate bro will announce their knowledge of said fact. They will take everything as an opportunity to spam facts at you to convince you that they're really knowledgeable, because in their mind, that's what makes somebody smart. You got a lot of facts stored away, right? No. I think that what makes you smart is knowing how to use facts, knowing how to deduce things from those facts, and knowing when a mistake in the chain of deduction has been made.
Generations. But one of the ways in which,
at this point, probably 5 or 6.
okay, sure, we can say however many generations. Is not super important. But what I'm trying to get to is that if we talk about education,
oh my god,
for
he's
instance,
gonna,
right?
yeah,
Would
do you see
agree
every little thing he's
that
fighting
Black
over?
Americans disproportionately are put in and have access to worse quality schools on an aggregate to the white population of the United States of America?
I would say that's pretty even killed if we're going across the entire country.
You believe that Black Americans and white Americans have, like percentage, not in terms of absolute numbers, because obviously white Americans make up a higher amount of the population than
I think
Black Americans.
Rose Wrist is
but as a
on to a
percentage
lot
of
of
the total population, there's an equal amount of Black and white Americans who have access to good quality of education. Is that...
This is not Rose Wrist's first
is that
No,
debate.
I would say that a lot of that comes down to class, right?
Okay, perfect. The
available amount of funds that are, available in different parts of the country. So, like, the broadest painting a brush with race here is just, it's like you're hyper focused on race in this particular example, and it doesn't even begin to address class or different parts of the country or teachers unions.
So let's talk about
like
class.
any number of things, right?
Yep. Okay, sure. So let's talk about class then, for instance. So by virtue of Black Americans specifically being discriminated against, put in worse schools on average, having less funding going to put towards their schools, this would lead to them on an aggregate having worse outcomes than, white Americans who would have gone to, on average, higher or better quality schools. And, because of this, which is, I don't understand really if you're arguing specifically against the fact that discrimination, we both agree that they experienced discrimination in the past, right? But for some reason, we're having an issue, like understanding how this discrimination has had an effect on wealth. So, do you believe Black Americans experience discrimination through education?
Oh, actually, no. I think that especially right now in our system, they actually get more of a leg up than most
Okay.
other groups, especially considering affirmative action.
Sure, but
Oh
well,
my
affirmative
God.
action, I have my issues with affirmative action.
I wonder what CTV thinks affirmative action is. I wonder what he thinks it is. Like, what is the actual mechanism in CTV's mind? Like, what's going on? Is it just like more scholarship? Does he think that like if you're black, you just get unlimited scholarship money for college? Does he think that? I don't know what he thinks, chat. I don't know.
Because affirmative action doesn't really build on the foundations of the Black experience in education. It more deals towards
So I guess the fear there is that like an unfair advantage is going to be given to certain students over others, and that the decision won't be made over merit. It'll be made over with a kind of affirmative action in mind. What he's missing is that there's already stuff like that going on, right? That cuts the other way, that benefits mostly like white students. These like, there are things like legacy scholarships, you know, if your parent went to school at the same university, you got better consideration for getting in the first place, and also maybe more financial aid, right? There already are similar things in place that actually like in the aggregate hurt black students, right? So kind of focusing on what might not really amount to as much help as he's thinking it does, and forgetting what is just normalized into the system as far as these like legacy programs, right?
is trying to orient outcomes towards university education. And those affirmative action programs had ended up having negative effects compared to, you know, other groups of people who go to the same university, right? Because
yeah, rich kids hardly have to apply, right? So it's it's like the things that like CTV notices. And so what we were talking about earlier with like the doomer politic video, you know, it's the kind of thing where just having a list leads some people to believe that the claims are more substantive than they actually are, versus just like, here are my claims, right?
those Black Americans didn't have the same base to build off of before they got into uni as a bunch of other people may have had, for instance.
But the reality here is, though, is that from a system point of view, right, Black Americans would have had more opportunity because of the affirmative action program.
Okay.
Rather than like, that's where it seems like, I don't know, like you would sit here and argue that they don't actually have the leg up because there were, you know, effects of that because people weren't actually ready for that level of education, and then they failed out and then didn't go continue their education past this point or whatever the case is. And then because of that, it's a bad thing. So it's like, no matter what anybody else says in this argument, you're going to think that you're right, even though the system was already set up to be able to give them a leg up to begin with. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but I don't agree with what you're saying. So I really want to pinpoint it. I didn't think we would get stuck on this early, but so if you look at, for example, the fact of like segregation in housing, for instance, how there is a reduced access or reduced likelihood for a Black American to in the past be able to obtain a loan or a good go to a good house or live in a good house or go to a good household. Those things would influence on an aggregate Black Americans' access to wealth in the future, right? Because education.
The risk of feeding the drama baiters. What, pray tell, did Mr. CTV ban you for? I'm curious. Do you know?
And housing and
Or
where you
time
live
you
are
out.
massive predictors of how successful you're going to be in your life, right? So then on.
I don't think wealth would be
I hope you didn't say NCC good, because that'll definitely get you banned at CTV's.
the word you'd want to use there.
What is the
right?
word I want to
think
use?
probably just, you know, overall money, right? Because there's a difference between, you know, having access to funds and money versus actually having wealth.
Oh
right?
my God.
And this is where
Okay.
like
we can use
when
both
you
words. We
actually
can use
trust
any words. Both apply.
Not really. Not really, right? Because
Okay.
wealth is one of those things
they
that
were
you
more
can
like
pass
fucking
down
around.
through
They
the
weren't like.
generations. And this is something that, especially here in the South, where I'm
So they gave you like little mini like timeouts or something.
from, right?
Okay.
Most of, you know, Southern Americans don't have a whole bunch of wealth just sitting around.
That is kind of okay. That is kind of like, yeah, that is kind of funny, right? It's like oh yes, that's right. I think there's a screenshot somewhere of CTV saying like, don't go to No Comment Chicks, she'll just ban you or something like that, right? Who the fuck bans people for disagreeing on abortion?
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I have, you know, fucking acres of property, houses, like all of these things. There's a few people
I mean, that's
that
still
have
wealth,
those
right?
kinds of things.
That's still like capital, but it's in an asset, right?
But then if you look at the population based off of just the relative size and then break each group down independently of that, probably end up finding that percentage wise, there's probably just about as many people that have risen themselves through the class system to get to where they're at.
I'm not quite sure what this has to do with the point of there being a massive disparity between the wealth levels of Black and white Americans.
That's specifically to do with the United States.
People forget he is a chud, okay? He's not like, there's worse chuds. Dylan's had worse chuds on. I don't think he's part of a violent gang or anything like that, like one of his other guests, or, he's never called. You put yourself in a position where you gotta have right-wingers every week. But at the same time, most right-wingers are gonna blow up in your face. They're gonna post TOS, they're gonna do something that gets you in trouble, right? So he's been able to find, 4 right-wingers who at least don't break TOS, mostly. And he's sort of sticking with them. But because of that, they benefit inordinately from the platforming, being that they get platformed every week, whereas other guests are kind of platformed more sporadically. So, it's building directly individual careers of right-wingers. And then it also gives them sort of some power in the show, right? And that's why, even though CTV shit is cringe as fuck, generally people will go easy on him because they kind of know he's Dylan's friend, right? They kind of, it's one of those things where, you're supposed to go into a debate and debate people, but if you debate the debate bros best bud, it's not going to ingratiate you.
Say getting rid of redlining laws or passing the Civil Rights Act or doing any number of things to correct the actual system in place, which is what we're arguing is systemic racism.
Let's work backwards because it doesn't
seem
to work if we start from the beginning. Okay. Do you agree with today that Black Americans...
Hold on. So because this is what we're talking about is this system, right?
Mm-hmm.
To just paint it with such a broad brush, again... Right,
dude,
does not actually.
He's got the broad brush on his brain.
Narrow the focus to the individual bias that I think that you would be wanting to point out in the system.
That is
right?
incorrect. I'm not trying to point out individual bias.
I'm just telling you the way it sounds to me.
All
right. Because of that, right?
Where did you get this? Though
you literally didn't. What I will see the point as
you're
which is
adding your own
liberties,
shit to what is being said.
It just paints the broadest of brush as possible.
Okay, so I very specifically
what an
would say
asshole.
That even the argument I'm making,
he literally
now
thinks
would
that
be perfectly valid.
Talking about broad brushes can make up for an argument because that's what smart people say. He's been watching his Ben Shapiro.
That's more of the second part.
CTV, you've been watching your Ben Shapiro.
Let's try working backwards instead, okay? Do you agree that today there is a massive wealth discrepancy between the wealth of Black Americans and white Americans on average? With this specifically, I think Black household wealth is somewhere in the ballpark of 1/60th.
Ask your question again, because you said on average, right?
Yeah.
Which means that the actual population of each community would be held separate and apart from one another in order for you to conduct this study. And then because of that, the percentages between the two are going to correlate out to where they're about the same.
Okay. I have no idea what you just said. But let's imagine 2 groups, okay? One group is made up of, let's say it's made up of 100 people, and another group is made up of 1,000 people, okay? Now, let's say that the average wealth of the group with 1,000 people is, let's say they have $30,000 in average out of that 1,000 group. The group with 100 people has an average wealth level of $60,000. Now, even though
he doesn't know
there
what he
is
just said.
More people in the group of 1,000 people, and if you add up the aggregate wealth of all the
maybe
people
I
in the
wasn't
group
paying
of
attention
1,000
either,
people,
but
and you stow it all together.
What I got from that was that CTV's got this idea that what was being said by Rose implies a series of conscious individual biases. In other words, the numbers are made up of individual incidents of purposeful racism. That's where the disconnect is, right? Is that CTV... Funny thing is, he's been in enough debates where I know somebody has tried to explain unconscious bias. I don't know if they just wall off and they just what goes on, right? But it sounds like this is an argument that could only be made by somebody who hasn't heard that response, because it's kind of
in a big pile, it might, surpass that of the group with 100 people, but on average, if you look at the specific wealth level of the average member of community A, 100 people, community B, 1,000 people, you will still see a massive discrepancy here. So throwing it together in the way that you seem to be trying to imply, doesn't make sense when analyzing the average wealth levels of like different racial groups.
Well, then, like, I guess maybe since you want to bring up groups, right, then can you answer me this question? What is the marker for number of dollars made that puts you in the top 1% of the world?
Oh, I'm not sure, to be quite honest.
You make $30,000 a year, you are in the top 1% of the world.
If you make how many $1,000 per year, sorry?
30.
30.
So this is the argument where we say that poverty in the United States isn't really poverty, because if you want to take like an average, a lot of countries people make less. I suspect he's not going to account for the cost of living, but he's going to say because of that any like complaint about poverty from a group in the United States is just minuscule. Like, you don't know real poverty until like it's like the argument. Oh my god, it's a incredibly cringe argument. It's an incredibly cringe argument.
Yeah.
Okay.
$30,000 a year puts you in the top 1% of the world, right? So then the real question then becomes,
so everyone, like, what, like, around the poverty level in the US is actually rich,
right, is like you would want to hyper focus the point of Black Americans to the point to where, like, now you would think as a Swede that we need to do something here in the United States to solve this disparity. But in reality, right, like everyone that's in the United States, and at this point, whether legally or illegally, right, is actually set up and apart from the rest of the world, right? Which is why the rest of the world is trying to come here.
So does that mean we should just no longer care about domestic economic policy because you're still going to be at the top percentiles of the entire world?
If you actually
yeah, basically no one has any right to complain.
wanted to fix domestic economic policy, the first thing you'd want to do would actually be to have the government start coining, actual money.
This is such bullcrap. Oh no, what are we getting to? Oh god. Gates, etc. say worst poverty line. The world's poverty line is $2.70 a day. It's a ridiculous argument. Yeah, it's the Pinker thing, right? Isn't it? Isn't this kind of like a Steven Pinker?
Instead of perpetuating this debt system that we currently have here, where the Federal Reserve is just printing off money to the tunes of billions and trillions of dollars.
Sure,
right?
but even if we did that thing, and there were still discrepancies within like broad racial groups in the United States of America, that discrepancy
I'm sorry, Taverto.
wouldn't disappear on the basis of just a blanket change to an economic system. Because if two different groups go into an economic system and you make changes to them.
At this point, though, that would be unknowable, because one, you'd have to actually reset that to the tune of where we are at currently in history, and then be able to try to measure the results after that fact, right?
Okay.
The point being is that the Federal Reserve has been in place since 1913.
Sure. This conversation...
I knew it. Chat. Federal Reserve is never the topic of any debate that CTV's ever been in. But that's not going to stop him from trying to make it the topic of debate, because he's convinced.
Short-term and long-term.
Is this some Ron Paul shit? Where did he get this?
Has nothing to do with the Federal Reserve. We don't need to bring up the Federal Reserve if we came here on
it does when you bring up economic policy.
Hold on.
Right?
Okay. But we're discussing economics specifically in relation to racial groups, correct?
There's no way, like, in reality, again, right, when the currency itself is fucked, that affects everybody. So it's not just something that would affect one community over the other.
People differently, right? So if you have more money, then it would probably affect you less
This is a good job staying on topic when someone's trying to pull you off
severely than if you had less money.
Chat, how much do you think that this is just CTV's hobby horse? Like, he really wants to talk, he really, like, this is his issue? And how much do you think that this was obfuscation? Was CTV getting in an uncomfortable place? Was there, like, a reason for CTV to kind of dodge out of that last?
Correct.
Kudos to the moderator for not saying shit.
The value of the money keeps decreasing to the point, and the inflation keeps rising to the point that there's no value to be able to create wealth with. That's affecting everyone. So there's a few people that are playing this game of crony capitalism that allows for it to be able to happen.
Okay. I think we should abandon this part of the discussion, and I want to go back a little bit, okay? Because now we're on discussing something completely different. So, once again, okay, do you acknowledge that there are vast differences and discrepancies in the wealth levels between Black and white Americans
Did anybody else hear vast differences?
on average?
Because I heard vast differences.
Oh, not vast discrepancies.
Okay, what would you define as a vast discrepancy?
I would say that the vast discrepancy right now is between the top 1-2% of the
Okay.
actual wealth in this country versus the rest of the population.
I'm sorry, I'm not making fun. I'm sorry, I don't mean to come across like I'm making fun of accents. I'm not an accent like elitist at all. No, I mean
And actually, the biggest disparity is between the 98% and the 2%.
Okay, so putting that aside for the minute, we can see that if
my accent in German is like laughable. My like American accent, it's very, very noticeable.
we're discussing economics,
To the point which I am pretty much impossible to understand in German.
we're discussing the
most of
race
the time.
elements of economics, which is what we sat down here to discuss, right? We're not discussing overall economics, we're not discussing overall wealth inequality.
Oh my
We're talking
God,
about
well, see, this is the
specifically
thing.
the
Wait,
racial
did they
aspects of wealth
kind
inequality.
of...
That's what we sat down to debate.
So, I mean, I guess this is the danger of setting a debate with no parameters. Now, I've seen other people do this and kind of go along just fine, right? Bring up one topic at a time. This is... Does Destiny do this? Like, right? This is common, right? But it does put you in the danger that like, you're going to get dragged into the Federal Reserve Twilight Zone, which is not fun. Not fun at all.
And we can see that the
My German is fine?
net worth
Actually,
of a typical
I
white...
was
Maybe it's my grammar that's problematic.
under the impression we were talking about systemic racism.
Yep, and we would have gone to that, but we got stuck
Wait,
on these premises,
that even
which I really
German?
thought we would have been able to agree.
Or did I
with.
just
But let's-
substitute
we
a
wanna
French
clear
word
those
there?
up so they can then
I'm not
move
a
on to
very
the broad-
agreeable person.
I have realized this by this period of time, okay? But we can see now that currently the net worth of a typical white American family is nearly 10 times greater than that of a Black American family. And this was from 2016, so this was not too long ago, okay? So do you agree with me that this is a fact?
That is in fact German.
Hello?
It doesn't even begin to explain, right, those members of the Black community that do in fact have money in their
Sure,
account,
but that's not
which
what we're
is,
trying to
again,
explain
back to
right
the-
now. That's not what we're talking
But I saw a rich black person once.
about right now. Right now, we're talking about the average experience of big groups
I'll
of
tell
people.
you what.
You don't draft
I'll tell you-
policy based on people's individual experiences, right?
You're
That
right,
doesn't make
which
any
is
sense.
again why we're going to have to go back to take out the
13 to every $100.
2% of that population, which I'm sure is probably white, right? Bill Gates is probably there, Jeff Bezos, right? Both white guys, right?
There's
So they're
probably
like,
some black people
hold
there.
on,
That's an
hold on.
underrepresentation, but
in that fucking category, that's like the upper echelon of the elite, right? So when you include those people in the study, which it seems like, again, with the broadest of brushes possible,
Wait,
we've conducted this study, and now
chat, has CTV taken the term broad brush and just run with it? Is he unironically Jackson Pollocking all over the canvas with his broad brush? Is that what he's doing? Is he slapping shit up against the canvas to just see if it'll stick? Is that what he's doing? Is that the kind of broad brush that we're dealing with, is a broad brush splatter paint? Chat, what the fuck is this shit? Seriously, he just used broad brush, like, with a positive. I mean, I guess, like, I don't know. Wait, how the fuck? That was weird, chat. I think there was some fucking real cringe there. Like, some special cringe that deserves, like, attention to be paid to it. I cannot ignore your cringe, CTV. It calls out to me.
people
Hold
there,
on,
that's an
hold on.
For me to understand where exactly your brain went off the rails.
underrepresentation, but
in that fucking category, that's like the upper echelon of the elite, right? So when you include those people in the study, which it seems like, again, with the broadest
He
of brushes possible, we've conducted this study, and now we come
no,
to
this is true even if you
conclusion.
look at media.
Okay, can anybody explain what broadest of brushes was doing there? I think that was gratuitous.
income.
I think he just like notices how quote unquote smart people talk and like drops in a bunch of those words randomly. I think
Not just average.
you'll paint the shed much faster,
recommend-
but like the broad brush thing is supposed to be like, you know, if you paint like, so like if I said like all debate bros are shitheads, that would be painting with a broad brush. That would be me saying like every single person in a whole big group of people is this, when in reality maybe what I was trying to say is you know, a certain percentage or too many, like more than I would like. Right? You know, so it's like that's the proper usage of broad brush. I guess you could. I'm trying to think of when you'd use it in a positive sense. I could almost imagine, like, you know, we want to paint with the broadest brush possible. Wait, that's not actually usually, that's not a thing, right? I just naturally am like, little dudes. I cannot pronounce your name, but I thank you for following. The broadest brush possible. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard it used to be like, which is good. Like, you know, we need to use the broadest brush possible. That would be like saying, oh no, seriously, like all rednecks, you know, need to go to, you know, need to start a 12-step program, right? And that would be like, okay, well, clearly you've got like a stereotype of rednecks, right? You know, and you're gonna, like, you would never, like, that would never be a good thing, right? Even, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like.
Recognize the difference between the median wealth levels and average wealth levels.
Well, one, I'm not looking at your study.
I don't know. This is super weird, chat. This is super weird. I think it's just what I said. I think he's just like grabbing words from people he thinks are smart. We do this like chat as streamers, right? We will pick up each other's terminology, the way that Demon Mama started saying "trill" all the time, right? She's grabbed that from Xander Hall, right? It's and maybe Xander Hall got it from someone else. Like Xander Hall used to say unironically all the time. I said unironically for a long time, probably still say unironically. That actually came from someone else. There was some other, you know, streamer that used to say unironically. Like, things do travel. Things do, you know, like that is real. But like, it's supposed to travel with an understanding. Like, if I used, I don't know, somebody's meme incorrectly, I would expect them to make an angry post about it, but then never explain what I did wrong with the meme or why it was funny, which actually was really funny, Demon Mama. I actually did post some major cringe there, and you almost caught me, but you were too caught up in your own moment of anger to remember to actually explain to anyone listening why my human centipede joke, which I didn't realize was a human centipede joke, was so cringe.
And two,
I literally didn't know what I was talking about. I was literally repeating stuff from the chat. So really, I think your argument is with them, not me, Demon Mama. Chat, Demon Mama hates you, just letting you know.
right?
Sorry.
The median income in different areas is going to be different.
It was a pretty good joke, I will admit, and I didn't fully understand it. I didn't remember where it came from, so
depending on the types of
that is why we love our joke scold Demon Mama, even though she is a bit of a joke scold.
Or different types of jobs are even available to the area, and a lot of that would have to do with local policy.
Okay.
Right?
Once again, that's not where we're trying to get the discussion. Right now, I'm still just trying to make you agree on the simple thing, okay? So, do you agree?
I know you're trying to make me do something.
No, I'm not trying to. I'm asking you super basic.
What was that? That was weird. What just happened? Anybody know? That was weird. CTV just got mad. CTV just... What just happened? Oh my god, I'm sorry, chat. I won't... we'll
the area,
make
and
it
a lot
go
of that
faster.
would have to do with local policy.
I know you don't want to
right?
stick on, like,
once again,
CTV this whole time.
Not where we're trying to get the discussion. Right now, I'm still just trying to make you agree on the simple thing, okay? So, do you agree?
I know you're trying to make me do something.
No, I'm not trying to... I'm asking you super...
I think he said, like, make you answer a simple thing, right? So, you know, like, CTV's reacting as if, like... As if Rose just said, I'm gonna make you wear a mask to the, you know, grocery store or something. CTV is like, hell no! I don't know. I actually don't know if I hope CTV's not anti-mask, but you know what I mean? It's like not... You're not being asked for anything, even, you know... Like, you're just being asked to answer a question.
Basic yes or no questions. This is not like...
And then when I don't agree, you just keep harping on it, right?
Okay, so do you just disagree with the fact that the median white household wealth is 7.8 times that of the median black household wealth? Yes or no?
Without looking at what you're looking at,
I can send this from you to you right now if you'd like to.
I mean, that would, you know, if you would have said it ahead of time, that probably would have been more useful, right?
I've been trying. Okay, so we agree on this then, right? We can move forward with this.
I was trying to make CTV understand.
Wait.
CTV, you caught him just in time. You might have learned something. You might have learned something, CTV. Good catch.
But we agree that this is the case, right? That the median household wealth is.
Oh, I agree that you're
7.8.
saying it, right? If you need
Okay,
me to
sure.
agree to something, I will agree that you are saying it. How's
Okay,
that?
wonderful. Okay, let's work from this present. But we need to agree on this for us to be able to move forward
A petulant 5-year-old. Most 5-year-olds aren't this bad.
in the conversation, right? We need to agree.
Yeah, 5-year-olds get a bad name. Chat, I was incredibly sweet when I was 5 years old.
the
But you don't
empirical
get to
reality.
control my thoughts.
Incredibly cute as well.
I don't agree right now.
I'm not trying to
right?
control your thoughts. I sent you the thing I'm referencing. If you go down to the first subtitles where it says wealth inequality preceding COVID-19, it says, first sentence here. In 2019, the median white household held $188,200 in wealth, 7.8 times that of a typical black household, $24,000.
Put a Snapchat baby filter on the
Okay,
next
can
Hippy
we-
Dippy.
Can we agree that this is the case?
There is no way possible that looking at an
True.
article from Brookings.edu is going to make me agree to a damn thing. Right?
So not even to the thing that is explicitly stated in the article.
The only thing that I could agree is that this is what your article says.
How do you ever get informed on things? I'm curious if this is like how high your bar is, or I don't even know if there is a bar.
No, it really is. That's how
I thought Rose was going somewhere entirely different with that.
high the bar is, right? I just don't read the headline of something and go, "Oh, that's got to be the truth." And let me just paint the rest of my narrative for life behind that, right? Everything comes through this very, very critical process.
Has CTV been like listening to like?
Before it actually becomes bedrock in my mind.
Okay. I'm trying to think of a way we can move forward with this discussion when it's practically impossible for you to agree with, or like even for the purposes of this discussion, for you to agree with something that is like so generally well accepted, just generally in academia and in society. But let's try to do it anyway.
But one of the things that you would be specifically referencing would be like loans, for example, that you pointed out earlier, right? There's no law that allows for the discrimination of people based off of anything other than, say, like their credit score
Sure.
or their ability to be able
100%.
to pay back the loan,
Yes,
right?
100%.
So then,
and I'm going to get to that later, but I'm still
Okay.
trying to do this first one. Okay. So, okay. If we just for the purposes of this discussion, okay, I would like for you to agree with the fact that there is massive discrepancies in the median household wealth between white and black Americans, okay? Now, I will ask you a simple question. Why is this? Why is there such a great disparity in the average household wealth between white and black Americans?
Yeah, laws are generally like restricting certain features. Yeah,
I'm sure you've got an answer
rather
for me.
than
I do, but the whole purpose of this is so we could work backwards, because when I presented
I
you with
know,
the answer
I know,
initially, you
look,
disagreed with that.
Yeah, but Rose, right? Understand that
Rose, if you're watching this, you've been incredibly good faith. You have a lot of patience. Don't feel bad about being frustrated here, because we're all frustrated right with you.
every single left side of the argument goes with attempting to control someone via taking them down a dialogue of tree of facts that they have. And if there's any disagreement with that, you get stuck in your
Wait a minute. I mean, like, this is true, and that was kind of like a dialogue tree, right? But, like, I don't think that, like, you weren't getting railroaded to anything that you shouldn't already know, right? I don't know.
argument, because it all depends upon this person being forced to agree with these facts that you already have.
Like, there are reasons. Listen, I mean, like, I've had people walk me down logic trees, and I always tend to put up with it. I always tend to answer their questions, but I don't answer their questions the way that they expect, because they don't really ponder their questions. And I do. I actually think through those questions. Like, you know, that is one thing that I will do. And like, you're not supposed to in this line of debate, you know, this whole logic tree thing, you're supposed to just kind of like, they ask you something and you're like, yes, no, you know what I mean? Right. And they're trying to illustrate something. They're like, okay, granted that this, granted that that, granted that the other, therefore this, right? And you either have to say, no, these things do not imply that, or you have to say, like, I was wrong about one of the things I agreed to earlier, right? You have to debase the argument somehow. So it's like a way to like point out where you think that someone's argument where you think that you don't see the justification in their opposition to your point, right? And with Relly, I think what he was wanting me to do was to say that, he wanted to answer the question why blackface was harmful. Like in other words, like, I interpreted that as what does it feel like to be black and experience like somebody doing that? And if I were to answer that question, I would be assuming the contents of lived experience that I don't have access to. And like, yeah, so yeah, I was like, no, that is fucking cringe. I'm not gonna come out here and tell you how black people feel when they see blackface. I don't fucking know, right? And it's irresponsible of me to guess. It's just not my place to answer. I don't know if that was necessarily a trap that he'd laid out for me, but it was definitely something that if I were to go ahead and answer, I'd be speculating on like what somebody else's lived experience is like.
Laid out presupposed ahead of time in this order. This is exactly where
Rose has debated some worse people.
Like, if you want to have the conversation, it has to be much more than a simple dialogue tree where you're attempting to control me and my brain.
You'll never control me and my brain.
Look, I promise you, I'm not sending any, like, you know, brainworms into your, you know, accommodation for the moment, trying to control you. Okay, I'm like, throughout this discussion, I've just been trying to work through two super basic points. I haven't made any broad implications. I haven't made any like overarching arguments. I have talked about 2 points. One being
yeah, he was trying to connect oh my god, yeah.
that Black Americans experienced discrimination in the past, and the second one, which we for some reason are still stuck on.
This is Rose Rest debating against critically thinking veteran.
Is that the discrimination had a dramatic effect on wealth. These 2 points don't mean anything. And I would say that typically if you are coming into a discussion
which is where like when it comes to wealth, the Federal Reserve is going to be the thing that fucking did that the most.
Back to the Federal Reserve.
Especially here in the United
okay,
States.
We can talk about the Federal
It's all about the Federal Reserve.
Reserve. If we're talking
Everything connects to the Federal Reserve.
Everybody.
overall, yeah, sure.
We're just too dumb to know. Only CTV understands why everything is connected to the Federal Reserve.
If we're having a discussion about how to overall improve the economic well-being of citizens of the United States of America, then sure, we could be talking a lot more about the Federal Reserve. However, that is not what we're specifically talking about right now for the moment. And I would say personally,
that's where you're attempting to paint it in the broadest of brushes possible, right? And it breaks up your dialogue tree because
Yeah. I think that's what it is like establish the like general facts. And at first, you know, Rose cited the exact like the exact percentage of wealth that like, you know, the average white family holds, you know, more than the average black family. And CTV I think questioned the study or something like, well, I don't know, that study might be sus as fuck, right? It's like, all right, dude, whatever. Could you at least admit that there's more wealth in your average, like, you know, white family than there is in your average black family? And yeah, no, dude, he's being...
as it addresses the specific...
Like, this is, like, what CTV is doing here is what Our Relevant was accusing me of doing. But in reality... Our Relevant really just wasn't asking his questions very well. Like, there might have been a way, I don't know, chat, but like just knowing what I know about Our Relevant now, I'm so glad I didn't walk down that dialogue tree. Like, you know, on one hand, like if it was just wording that Relly was missing to like signal in my mind, like what kind of, you know, if maybe he was asking me something different than how I was taking it, you know, it would have been like, I want to be good faith. I want to be like a good debate partner. But honestly, you got to notice if somebody's like doing that dialogue tree shit with you, there's only so much of that you can put up with. Okay. Like if you want to dialogue tree me, it better be like, hey, the sky is blue, right? Yeah. And the ground is solid, so like therefore, you know what I mean? It better be like 3 points, like really quick, like, you know, just like, I mean, obviously you don't need agreement on those things, but like 3 points that we need agreement on, get them established, and then take me to there. Therefore, if your whole thing is like, okay, this is true, right? You're like, yes, this is true. Okay, and this is true, right? Okay, yeah, that's true. And this is true because of, you know, well, it's, you know what I mean? If you've got like a whole fucking essay to like, you know what I mean? You can't just fucking dominate a debate like that. That's fucked up. Okay. I don't know. I mean, am I like limiting myself to simpler arguments that way? I mean, I think debate bros would argue that like, I'm imagining their comeback at what I just said would be, listen, this is like, you know, if you want to deal with a complex argument, this is how it has to be dealt with. If, you know, they only get to say 2 points and then I go on to something and change the subject, then, you know, they're not able to flesh out like their argument. So, you know, I could see that. I've just seen so many bad faith debate bros use this shit to just railroad somebody into nonsense, right? And they'll try to slip that in nonsense and faster than you realize, so that like, there's something that they said that has like an element of nonsense in it, but it sounds sensible. And so you just like react, yeah, sure, right? and then you're at the point where you're like, wait, do I walk back the yeah, that seems kind of sus, right? Do I, what do I do here, right? It kind of it's a shitty place to
value
be.
of the money, right? And that
But
affects
this would be like,
everyone,
okay,
which
so
takes it completely away from race, right?
we
It's
can
like we agree
can
that there
both
were things that happened to black people in the
Hi, Pesky.
past, but
Is it-
we agree on that, right? But moving forward from that, the laws have already been corrected for
Oh
that.
my god, everything's okay. Everything's okay. Everything's forgiven. All the laws have been corrected, so that's all that needs to happen. CTV, yo, listen, like, I know you're a conservative. I know you're not gonna have a good take on this issue, but that is like some pathetic shit to get stuck on right there, right? Like, he's literally saying that a group that's disenfranchised to the point of being considered property and then, like, pushed out their freedom is a system that very quickly turns into, like, a formalized second-class citizen status, right? Economic discrimination, social discrimination, right? All the stuff that goes along with Jim Crow. And then as long as the slavery law got changed, as long as the Jim Crow laws got changed, we're good. We're good. Somehow you're supposed to make up that deficit, like, magically. And if you're not, it's because you're lazy and you need to pull yourself up by those non-existent bootstraps. CTV, this is incredibly cringe, even for you, brother. Even for you.
And the fact of the matter is that the Federal Reserve was put into place before the civil rights movement, or even and before the war on drugs.
Okay.
Right? A lot of the expansion
What?
of
What? Oh my god, CTV. You smoke too much. If you think that, like, is he gonna argue that the Federal Reserve caused the war on drugs? Motherfucker. Listen, I don't want anybody ever to accuse me of being paranoid again, okay? I don't want anybody ever to tell me that. That is some paranoid shit right there. Oh my god, that is some straight up... Needs to read Richard Rothstein, The Color of Law. CTV bingo.
the healthcare system, which
Unironically.
has led to the rise of big pharma and kept all these drugs.
Okay.
The Fed Reserve. I mean, like, listen, CTV, I mean, if this was true, like, yeah, like, let's just love the Fed or whatever, right? But, like, you're just giving us this shit with, like, that it caused, like, it got made before the Federal Reserve got made before all these things, and then therefore it would cause them.
A lot
We
of
need to
things
slow
that affect
down,
this
okay? We're
thing,
going way
right?
too fast.
War on drugs, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you
The pharmaceutical industry.
Exactly.
a simple
Exactly.
You're the
That's-
one
that's
going too
entirely-
fast, not me. Okay.
I
I
get
have been
that. I
very
get
slow
what-
and methodical.
I get you.
Okay,
I
perfect.
get you. This is where, like,
So
the critically thinking gears include all of this information into one.
Okay. Critically is
Right?
one way to explain the way you're thinking.
I'll tell you what,
but
I'm going to be
hold-
quiet for a minute because I got to pee, right?
Okay.
So I'll be listening.
Okay, look, you can do that shit. You can do that shit, like, oh my god, chat. You just can't do that shit during a debate. Look, this is a thing that streamers do, okay? Like if I need to take a bathroom break and I've got somebody on with me, I'm gonna say, hey, is there anything you want to talk to my audience about, right? Because then that's a great chance for my audience to get to know them. It's a great chance for me to take a pee. All these things can happen. All these things can happen. But when you do it in a debate, what the fuck is that? You're supposed to debate at CTV while he's taking a piss? I mean, I'm assuming he's got, like, he's got the Bluetooth headphones in, right? That's how, right? So he's listening, he said, but, like, holy shit, this is, like, CTV, what the fuck? What the fuck, man?
Right. Oh, fuck. Okay. I don't even know how I don't want to say anything because then if I come back, he's gonna accuse me of trying to brainwash the audience. So
That's really awesome, ladies.
I'm just gonna say hello.
I hope she enjoyed it.
Critically thinking veterans audience. I hope you're having an interesting time during this discussion. When he comes back, I'm going to ask him if it is for him, if it's possible, if it's conceptually possible for these two things to be true, right? For it to be true, number one, that there are broad economic policies that we can pass and changes we can make to the broad economic system that can
Oh, I'm
improve
sorry, you weren't talking to me. I thought it was my mom that you pounded. It was somebody else's?
and change the aggregate wealth of everyone in the United States of America.
Somebody
as a
else's
whole,
mom.
right?
It's okay,
And
Chad,
for
it wasn't my
also
mom.
to be true that
My mom
on top
didn't
of that,
get-
there are also specific changes that should be done, and there are also specific issues that certain different groups of people within that aggregate of all the
You would break out your guitar and start playing?
US economic actors that face specific issues when it comes to the economy, for instance. And the correct answer to this is yes, it is possible for both of those things to work at once, because there isn't any
Okay, the
inherent
correct
contradiction.
answer is not that, because then
Okay.
what it does is it mischaracterizes a whole slew of things
Okay,
along
what
the
have I
way. Right,
mischaracterized in this? I want
Dude, there's so many delightful moments of cringe in CTV's like performance, right? And I do call it a performance. I somehow doubt that the person that like climbs out of the computer chair after CTV's done streaming much resembles like CTV that we know on stream, right? Now, I do think that probably the southernness is real. But yeah, I can't imagine he's this character in real life.
you to tell me directly what I mischaracterized.
Okay, I'm glad you asked the question, right?
Okay.
So,
Oh my god.
your
Sus. What is Sussy
manufacturing,
Baka?
right? Jobs, people being able to work. These things create opportunities for people to rise themselves out of the situation that they were born into and to be able to be the most productive.
It's
human
all
being
about
that they
bootstraps,
possibly want
chat.
to be.
It's all
And when you're
about
being the most
bootstraps.
productive
Being
human
your
possible,
best person.
you are going to
Something.
accumulate money, right? Which then you can take and turn into wealth over time, right? That all being said,
Dude, I love how the white privilege shows so hard. You just turn the money into wealth over
The
time.
United States need to really grab a hold of its fiscal spending so that we
There's one group of people that's not working out very well for CTV. And I know. You've probably got reasons, and they're totally not racist or anything. You're just
can reduce the amount of debt to the lowest form possible before the system comes crashing down on itself, right? And maybe see about switching over to another currency that would allow for the dissolution of the Federal Reserve
like the euro. What does he want us to do?
and get the actual money back in control of the people, which is where it needs to be, right? That is
Okay.
going to have the overall effect of being able to
We are not discussing an
more-
overall effect. for the moment.
damn it. This is going to allow for everyone in this system, when the values continues to hold over time rather than being taken
This
away
is-
over time, for everyone to be able to build wealth, right?
I gotta say, this really delivers. Okay,
If that was
it's a slow build, but it
allowed
delivers.
to happen, you would see the wealth of the United States and the wealth of its people continue to travel out, because guess what? People need goods and services, right? So they would continue to branch that out all over the world. Now, very specifically, the things that need
What's not funny, the funniest part isn't just that he gets like economics, like he vastly oversimplifies like economics. The really funny part is that he thinks he knows economics. Like he thinks that like having these vague ideas of the flow of money is akin to like understanding like this is also white privilege, right? You got guys like Minnesota Mike and critically thinking veteran, absolute fucking dipshits that get a platform to speak their fucked up ideas, their harebrained, ill-conceived ideas, right? That have withstood no sort of intellectual rigor in terms of their conception of them, right? There's no like critical thinking, ironically enough. There's no critical approach taken to your own thoughts. It's just blurted out in the midst of a stoned, incoherent rant.
to happen in order for us to get here would be to actually rein in our fiscal spending, reduce, laws that
This
are
has nothing
like
with
the
what
war
we're
on
talking
drugs.
about.
It's everything to do with it. You just don't understand it right now. Right? So,
Rose Wrist, look, I've debated this guy too. Solidarity, okay? This is like, no, this is fucked up. This is so bad what you're experiencing.
reducing the fiscal spending by reducing the war on drugs, reducing the prison industrial complex, reducing parts of the army specifically, right? Different programs that are
And this is like what, Dylan will sort of weird champ about CTV is like, hey, he's got like he wants to cut the military based, he wants to end the war on drugs based, like it's just like, oh my
in
god.
place for social welfare. These things, especially with regard to social welfare, it needs to be put back into the state's control instead of the federal government, because our federal government here was never meant to do these things, right? Like the most apt example.
I believe that Is he talking about welfare? It's kind of a combination of the two. It's not. It's like
I don't want to
between
have any
Sweden-
conversation on
there are federal programs, but then there's also like state. It kind of like the aid varies by state.
like
I
fiscal
get that
government
you don't
spending
want
at the
to.
moment.
I
That's not
get
what we
that you
agreed
don't
to have
want
I would gladly have a discussion on that if that's what we agreed.
The war on drugs is a globalist
If
conspiracy.
you're debate
if
about
you're
and want to have a
talking-
conversation about.
States' rights.
You're talking about systemic racism, and because of
Yes.
that, it includes the system and fiscal responsibility or physical fucking money getting spent.
Oh my god.
Is
Okay.
See, this is another trick that the Republicans do, right? Every family has a budget. Fiscal responsibility is a real thing for a family, right? Or for any kind of like group of people or one person, right? You know, like you gotta like take in as much as you're spending, right? Or else you're gonna have trouble. So that's a real material like kind of limit that we all understand, you know, that most of us understand, that those of us that aren't extremely wealthy can be assumed to understand, right? And so they take that and they say, you know how that works? Well, the federal government's just like that. If we, the entity that prints the money, runs out of money, and then they'll, even when you bring up MMT, right? When you tell them that's not how things work, you know, you tell them that like, you know, like borrowing money is a normal function of any sort of financial entity, right? It's like, you know, and it's like it's done because it's more expedient than you'd actually like lose money in the future if you weren't borrowing that, because you need to invest it in things. You need certain things. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm saying this. This is worthless. It's not like CTV is gonna go through my fucking VOD and listen to this and be like, oh fuck, I finally get it. Thank you, no comment chick. Like nobody's gonna fucking get through to CTV. He's gonna continue being a dunderhead.
part of that system, right? So
But it's not okay. So, for example, would it be justified to talk about, for example, the roles of like street
We've been out of money for years now. I know.
when you're talking about systemic racism, right? Because technically, like zebra.
But at some point, China's gonna come and get us for it. They'll be able to come and get us. They'll repossess the country. They'll just come in and be like, "I'm sorry, it's China now. You should have paid your loan off. You should have borrowed more money.
crossings and make
Now we own you."
up part of the infrastructural system.
Oh
that
yeah,
is the United
China's
States of
like
America.
a
So clearly,
huge
this is something that is
fucking.
vital to the discussion of systemic racism. Does that make sense? Is that a good argument?
those a crosswalk supposed to be correlative to the actual system that is spending taxpayer dollars to the tune of 25 trillion, 26 trillion dollars.
Okay, let's go back. Okay, let's try. I'm gonna try this one more time. Okay, why? I want you to explain to me why there are massive disparities in the median household wealth between Black and White Americans today. Can you explain that for me?
It's an unknowable question.
He's
It
being
is
really.
absolutely
He,
noble. I want-
he's
I
being
want you to
really
know
sweet.
that's
He's
possible.
being really like he's being
It's
he's
unknowable.
being very
See, this is
patient
right
with
here where
CTV.
you would just say or ask the question, why is it unknowable, instead of telling me that I'm wrong, right?
Okay, what if I give you? Okay, can I try to give an explanation for that instead?
You want to ask the question, or are you just going
Like
to keep
unlike
trying to move past
CTV,
it?
Well, you said
he's
that you don't know,
actually
so
trying.
now I'm
He's
gonna-
actually
No,
I said that
trying to have a
no, I didn't
debate
say
here.
I didn't.
Sorry, my
I
bad. You
didn't
said it's
say-
unknowable. Well, technically,
Now-
that would be an
now-
extension
now
of
I
saying
know
you don't
you're
know as well,
listening.
right?
Now I know you're listening, right? It
Isn't
is
that kind of the same
unknowable.
thing?
Now I
right?
know
If
you're
it's unknowable,
listening.
then that
What
would also
the
mean that you
fuck?
don't know.
Listening to
In order-
what though? Listening to fucking drivel. Listening to recycled conservative talking points from the like recesses of Rush Limbaugh's ass. Like, what is this shit?
For you to know this thing,
What the fuck actually is this
you have
shit?
to actually go and interview every single one of these people and
The dude sounds like a random word generator trained on Fox News stories. Unironically, yes, chatter in Rose Wrist.
find out
Unironically, yes.
what the truth is as to why they didn't achieve whatever it is that they
Have you
wanted to be
interviewed
able to
every
achieve.
single person in the United States of America and asked them if the federal spending and the monetary policy has directly contributed to their well-being in the United States of America?
Well, that's inherently different than what you're currently talking about. Whenever you're talking about median household income, which has specifically to do with the choices that those individuals must make, versus right the Federal Reserve being the blanket policy that was passed, and then now that affects everyone. Right? That's inherently different.
Okay, I'm going to try to give my explanation for why there is this great disparity in wealth, okay? So we can see that throughout the entire history of the existence of the United States of America, or at least for the purpose
Hey, whoever suggested this debate, thanks. It's nice to find other people to watch that are, you know, like I think I really like Rose Rust's debates. Yeah, I think I like, I don't know. It sounds like I don't think that I don't think we would have the exact same takes on some economic issues, but What everything Rose has said here is pretty fucking reasonable, and definitely definitely's got some patience and the debate. I mean, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the whole logic tree thing, but like I don't feel like this was as bad faith as our relevance logic trees. I think he was just trying to get like he was just trying to have a debate, basically.
So of this argument, I can say, well,
And with CTV, this is the only way that you're going to have a debate is to try to do this, because otherwise you're going to get stuck on the Federal Reserve and China and all this bullshit.
for the entirety of the existence of the United States of America until the passing of the Civil Rights Act, okay? So we don't need to get into more debatable things, because I have a feeling if we do that, we're going to be stuck here for at least 20 hours. Throughout that entire bit of history, which is a large and the majority part of the U.S. history, we've seen Black Americans been, you know, not being allowed to own property.
Has the
being
patience of a
slaves,
saint,
being
and not a
second-class
saint of
citizens, being
sense,
sent
a real
to worse
saint.
schools, their communities
A
being
real
over-policed,
saint.
them generally having worse access to education and to healthcare and to all the different aspects of society that we deem as important in order to make someone able to obtain their well-being that they would like to do in life. And because we know that's the case, we know that Black Americans experienced discrimination at the past, and we know that the Civil Rights Act, you know, this isn't even passed 100 years ago, right? In that situation, we can see that, okay, you know, given that, well, okay, we may not disagree on this, we might not agree on this.
Yeah, but you do get though. You do understand.
This is so
though,
wild.
right?
This is so
like,
yeah.
It's not like Black
CTV
people were not allowed to own.
CTV literally expects like Black people to reach like parity within like 3 generations, and it's like, yo, you could put anybody in that situation, they're not going to reach parity if they start off in that situation. Even if you somehow do eliminate discrimination, which I don't think we have. I think there's a lot of discrimination that probably gets taken down because of the laws, but there's a lot of informal, there's a lot of social discrimination. There's a, you know, there's so much that's still going on that cuts against like Black people. So yeah, no, this is beyond ridiculous. This argument is ridiculous on
property, right? This entire
periods of
time,
history,
right?
they
It's
were-
like you could grant CTV just for the sake of argument like 4 out of 5 of his points, and his argument still falls flat.
No, not for this entire time. I never said for the entire period of time, okay?
Right, but you're only referencing right back to the Civil Rights era, which is in 1964, which I've actually heard members of the Black community that are older that actually have argued that the Black community was much better off whenever it was segregated, because at least then people knew what side of the street to walk on, and because of that, those communities kept their own money inside their own community, and that's when they started to be able to be.
Did you hear that shit? What the fuck was that? What the fuck was that? What does knew which side of the street to walk on mean? What the fuck did we just hear? Hey, listen, I called him Confederate television as a meme, okay? That was a meme. I did not think there was like a reality behind, like an actual fucking reality behind. Holy fucking shit!
Be a little bit more prosperous because they just weren't interacting with other people, and that can happen.
All right.
Now,
If you
this
want to
God
is
have,
one
if
of
you
those
want to have a
damn!
discussion about whether or not segregation was better for Black Americans than not segregation, we should have said that was a topic of discussion. but
CTV,
that's
that is a
discussion. Maybe this is
spicy
what's-
fucking
maybe
take.
This is what's getting us stuck here, okay?
In
Do
fact,
you
I don't
believe
even
that
think
the-
it's
examples from
spicy. I
history,
think
though,
it's
right?
just
You believe that the
rancid.
wealth-
Went out there and-
the wealth levels of
Yeah.
your parents
Holy
and their
shit,
general
what
economic
was
well-being
that?
has an influence and predicts your own like wealth levels and your
Knew which side of the street to walk on. I'm trying to think of a way that I could interpret that, like, giving the most benefit of the doubt possible. Can anybody think of a way that that is, like, meant in, like, a not yikes
own
way?
success in
I'm
life.
sorry, my
Do you believe that is
No,
a-
eyes are just like, whoa.
I think
I'm
that
just
if I
like,
would have just stayed in the mountains of North Carolina, I'd probably be lucky to even have a place to live versus where I'm at now. And the decisions that I've made in my life and used the systems that were available in order to raise my own station in life allowed me to be able to get to where I'm at.
Okay, I have a question for you. Let's say we take a group of 100 students, okay? And there's a wide range of different students here, okay? And then we put them in a cloning machine, okay? So now we have 2 identical sets of 100 students, okay? So between the groups, there's exactly no
Thought
large
experiment
differences
time.
between the groups, okay? They're the same groups. And we put one of these groups of 100.
what's interesting is that these are very debate bro tactics, you know, like, right? But I feel like they're not being delivered with that toxicity that, you know, you would normally associate with that. Like, there's not, I don't know, somehow I don't mind them as much from
Kids into
Rose.
a bad school, into a school with not enough funding, with no extracurriculars, with overworked teachers, with, you know, any number of negative things, and then we put the other group of 100 students into a school with all of the things that the other school was lacking, okay? Which one of these two groups of students do you think will perform better in education and will have better merits?
Well, obviously, it depends on how you're testing each group.
Okay, if we're testing their grades, their level of academic attainment.
Oh my god.
Okay, are they being given the exact same test?
Yep, everything is the same except for the specific school they're in between the groups.
So why does it have to be a group for this example? Why can't it just be two individuals?
Sure, you can take one individual, you can put them in a cloning machine and send like these two identical individuals to two different schools. My point would still stand.
Okay. So we got two individuals that received a different education and yet are
Dragon.
having the same test given, right?
So we have the identical individual being sent to two schools with vastly different quality. Who will end
Still
up with
two
the better
individuals. Still two individuals.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You missed a very spicy take.
It's the same, like it's the same inherent person. They're just
I still
included
don't
in two
know
different environments.
exactly what CTV
So then,
meant
like
by
in this vacuum, where like they're not even a person at this point, all they are is just a clone, right?
Well, it's two different. Well, it's two of the same
Oh
person.
my god, he's going into it's like the Jurassic
it's
Park
actually
thing
two
over it
individuals,
right over
right? Sure, two
again.
individuals.
Just because someone has
Like, this is
someone
a thought
shares the exact
experiment,
same
CTV.
Okay,
DNA,
so let's say they're
right?
two individuals. Let's say
Like
they're two individuals.
This is
Can you
not a
answer?
science fiction movie,
Okay,
my
so
dude.
if
This
you
is
were
a thought.
giving some-
You don't have to get into like, you know, now what kind of like pod are we talking about that these clones hatch out of? You know what I mean? I don't know what the fuck he's trying to ask there. Oh my god. So he said like he was talking about like he said that he knew some older black people who had said that things were better for the black community before the Civil Rights Act. So before the formal end of segregation. And he went on to say something like, at least people knew which side of the street to walk on. And I'm trying to imagine, what is the best faith, what is the greatest, like, benefit of the doubt I can offer this statement as far as not being, like, de facto support of segregation. Like, I'm sure if I had CTV here, CTV, listen, you're banned from my chat, but if you want to come on here and explain this take, I would love to hear it, because, like, I don't want to think that you're, like, salivating at the prospect of segregation. Like, right? I don't think that there must have been some miscommunication. I can't be understanding this correctly. CTV, please fucking tell me it's not true. Please tell me it's not true. At least people knew what side of the street to fucking walk on? What the fuck? How did... Do we need to roll it back? Chat, I'm not mistaken, right? I don't really want to roll it back. I kind of want to be done with CTV and with this debate, like, because it's icky, but, like, I don't want to be, like, you know, bringing something up that's not true. Did I miss something? I'm having trouble believing, not necessarily that, like, people like CTV don't have these thoughts, but that people like CTV would see fit to express these thoughts in public. That's what it surprises me.
Someone to test off of information that they themselves didn't get a chance to cover,
Uh-huh.
of course they're not going to perform as well. That's just, it would be silly to think anything otherwise, right?
Okay.
But that's
Self-report. This is a sussy baka. We got a sussy baka here.
where, like,
A real sussy baka.
the example is just a poor example because it's setting up the premise from the start, right, that is the only way in which someone can receive education.
What?
I'm not okay.
What?
So we
What?
both agree then that the quality of your school that you go to is going to influence the grades you obtain for the worse or for the better. We agree on this, right?
Quality is a subjective word.
Okay. Do you think you can say that a school that is like well constructed, has good staffing, has extracurricular activities, has a gym hall, has non-overcrowded like school or like classrooms, that is going to be a higher quality school than a school that doesn't have those things? Can we both agree on this?
Probably not.
That would
Probably
be
not.
That would
He's
be a
gonna
higher quality school.
Okay,
Sure.
perfect. Okay, so then we agree that the quality of the school you go to can have positive or detrimental effects to the grades you obtain, like from that school, right?
Wow.
Quality matters, right?
Okay, yeah, perfect. All right, I'm so happy we
Wow.
agree on this. Okay, so
Okay.
what type of individuals in society are going to be more likely to be able to send their kid to a high quality school? Is it going to be a less wealthy person or a more wealthy person?
Either.
Can you explain your answer?
Well, in this example, right? One, the quality of the school, like you laid out some very specific things for what quality is, right?
I'm
But the
trying to get
quality is not
stoned
just
on the
tied to
off
the number
chance
of
that I
things
can
that the
like
school actually has
understand
access to,
CTV
right?
if
The
I get
quality
stoned
comes from
enough,
the actual
right?
people that are teaching the material, right? So
That's
this
what
is
I
where
need,
like the
isn't it?
conversation would obviously branch
To just
into, say, like
match
teachers
him in
unions,
terms
where
of
you can't
pure
actually get rid of bad teachers.
THC
So like
Hold on.
this
blood
is
concentration,
do you
right?
would you generally say
Is that
that
what I'm looking
wealthier
for, chat? Is
schools,
that what I need?
on
Is
average,
that
are
what I
going to
want?
have more qualified people working at them than less wealthy
necessarily,
schools?
not
On
necessarily.
average, not for every single case, but on average, would you see that
There's
there
no-
would be a higher degree of
Not
competency?
necessarily. I would actually have to go talk to each one of these teachers and find out what type of curriculum they're putting in place and how they're conveying the message to the students, right? If they can't actually reach their students, then it's pointless, right?
Okay, at this
I was a
point,
little
I
late
think
on this
I've
one.
finally distilled, I suppose, what the key roadblock in this conversation is. And I think that the key roadblock is that I think you refuse to engage with the concept of an average.
And I think
just
that you
aggregate
refuse to
generalities.
acknowledge, and I think that you are refusing to acknowledge that there are a lot more
I want to hear CTV say, well, don't you think that the concept of an average is empirical concept such as this? Don't you think that's kind of Anglo-boxed? I've been listening to this streamer Infrared lately, and he's been telling me about a lot of things that are Anglo-boxed, so therefore I don't have to listen to them. Let's see, logic, genetics, science, truth. These things are all very Anglo-boxed, and they're not very, I'm sorry, chat. I'm sorry. Forgive my CTV impression. It's pretty cringe.
factors at play than the very specific dialogue tree that you'd like to take somebody down.
I agree with you that there are a vast multitude of different factors to play in an individual's success. However, I am also making the statement that on top of those things that are highly individualistic that
Look,
people
if
face,
somebody,
there's also
if
a
Irrelevant had
broad,
walked
more
me down
sort
a
of
dialogue
collective
tree like
experience that
this,
different groups face in society.
I wouldn't
by
have,
virtue
I
of
wouldn't have
their
been
given
sus
identity.
of
So I'm
him.
not excluding the others. I'm
You
just
know what I
saying that
mean?
on top of the others,
You
there
could
is
tell there was
also a
something
sort of
different going on
aggregate
with
or a
Irrelevant,
broad
though.
experience that different groups of individuals face.
I
But-
think that if an individual allows their identity to hold them back, specifically along racial lines, then that is something that that individual needs to come to terms with. Because in my experience, anybody that is willing to work
I
hard
think I owe
to get what they
Irrelevant a
want in
little
life, it
bit of
doesn't
scrutiny
matter what the
myself,
color of their
chat.
skin is here in this country, right? People like people that
Of all the people that did, like, NCC bad content, like, Irrelevance was complete fucking cope. Like, he lost a debate to me, okay? He came on probably trying to, like, end me. Like, probably trying to, like, pin me to some yikes-ass take that could cancel me, right? And he didn't get me. Instead, I put his fucking face down in the dirt. Like I should, okay? Because he came with weak fucking game, and I wasn't falling for his bullshit. And he win again as soon as, like, you know, everybody's dogpiling me. Irrelevant jumps in there too. Irrelevant, I think that we owe you some scrutiny. Is there anything that you've ever said on your stream that's really fucking sus? Is it possible that I might just have in my possession one of those clips? Irrelevant. Should I afford you the benefit of the doubt in what you meant when you afforded me no good faith at all? When you basically have been trying to destroy me ever since the Demon Mama RGR shit? Should I fucking hold back on your dumbass? Should I, Irrelevant? Tell me. I'd like to hear from you.
want to work for what they get, right? So
But we both agree that just wanting something isn't enough, right? The sort of environments that you're put in.
I'm sorry, it's the logic tree. That's what fucking... That was a really bad experience, right? Here, poor little me just like, oh, one of the bigger streamer wants to talk to me about, like, have a debate, you know, in good faith. No, dude, he wanted to destroy me. That motherfucker was in there to fucking end me.
Are still very important, right? So in the example with the two like identical people that go to different schools, right? Even though they're like,
I don't know, I'll take like 20 CTVs over one Irrelevant, honestly.
if we believe there's such a thing, such as like an inherent drive of these two individuals are exactly
But yeah,
the
fuck
same,
CTV too.
we
Absolutely.
would still agree that they
I
would
still can't
most
believe
likely
the
have
shit that
disparate
he said.
outcomes in their
Okay, no,
grades
wait. After
because
tonight,
of
maybe
the
CTV's
environment in which
maybe
their inherent
CTV's
drive was
legitimately
expressed.
worse
The
now.
difference between being able to express
I don't
their
think
drive
I've
in high
ever
quality
heard
school and
Irrelevant
express
say
their
anything
inherent drive
that
in low quality
bad.
school.
not necessarily. The quality of the school while you can point out that that should be a better quality school because it has more resources available to it, doesn't necessarily mean that the teacher that's conveying the information is doing so in a way that's going to be best for the student.
Okay. Now it seems like we've gone back on a thing that you previously agreed upon, because we circled back to it without me explicitly like saying let's talk about this same thing again.
That's why I brought up teachers unions, because that's where the conversation would end up going to.
I don't
right?
know.
Okay.
Like this, a lot of
let
this
me
has
try
been
something different.
a lot of this has been Rose trying to work with logic trees and CTV, which basically CTV invited. Okay, because all CTV said at the beginning of this, like, yeah, I'll just let you start talking and I'll jump in when I have a like point of difference, right? So CTV basically, it sounds like kind of unprepared, kind of doesn't know where to start. So he's like, yeah, go ahead and I'll just like jump in. And he's jumped in before with like the Federal Reserve, where it's like not like relevant at all. He keeps on trying to change the subject.
Okay, do you believe that, just generally being like a second-class citizen and, having limited access to a number of the different financial institutions that white people may have had access to before the passing of the Civil Rights Act may have hampered Black Americans' ability to accumulate wealth relative to white people?
No, I think that the Federal Reserve has done a pretty good job of pulling the wealth out of the nation as a whole, right? And then through crony capitalism, it's
Federal Reserve is why CTV doesn't have to answer any questions that he's afraid are gonna make his point. They're gonna expose his like takes for the cringe that they are. Because of the Federal Reserve, we can change. It's always the fucking Federal Reserve. Holy
allowed
shit!
to have certain individuals have more wealth than others.
That is a phenomenal way to not answer my question at all.
Oh, it's a phenomenal way to answer your question in a way that is much bigger and a much better answer
So
than
I'm
what you
asking
were
you
previously establishing on this dialogue tree.
specifically in the context of the relative wealth of two different racial groups. Okay, if that's the lens of analysis that we're applying to this, because we're discussing issues related to race and racism, specifically only looking at those two parts and those two sort of like actors, okay? Do you not believe that having a lack of access to financial institutions would predispose Black Americans towards having a harder time accumulating wealth than their white counterparts who would have had access?
No, transphobic is what's in your log earlier. The log that's produced anytime somebody comes in chat and says anything? Like, the stuff that you said earlier, that was transphobic, okay?
To those financial institutions.
You're talking about specifically before the laws were passed that forbid that behavior?
Yes.
Sure, why not?
Okay, perfect. So, turns out we did agree on the second point. I just had to rephrase it
Should we repost what you said? Do you want to see what it looks like?
a little bit. So the second point was that discrimination faced by Black Americans in the past had an effect on their wealth. So
yeah,
then,
before
okay,
they had access to it,
perfect.
right? So what's the excuse?
So we agree.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
Yeah, that's the point I'm going to get to. That's another one of my points. We've only worked it.
That is the dumbest statement I have seen in a long time. And I'm wondering why the mods even that should have been a ban. Like, why are we letting a transphobe come in here? Like, what's going on, mods?
2 out of 5 points.
What's the excuse since then?
I'm going to get to that
right?
in just a minute.
No,
okay.
So while I can agree that in the past,
I'm going to get to that. I'm going to
happened,
get to that.
It doesn't ever get to the point of today.
Can we spot trolls? Yeah,
right?
Thanks.
So now you're just living in the
Jesus
past.
Christ.
Trying to justify
Your argument would be
right?
perfectly valid right now if I would have just said, because of this, systemic racism exists, and that's why Black people have a poor. Then you would be correct. However, I've stated on multiple times, like multiple occasions, that's not the end of my argument.
Oh my
there
God.
are a bit more aspects, okay? So,
can I get a pronoun check for Rose Wrists? Rose Wrist, singular. I was told he, they pronouns earlier. If that's not correct, somebody let me know. But I don't want to take, pronoun corrections from a transphobic troll. That seems like that would probably be more likely to get me a wrong answer rather than a right answer.
Look, whenever you start doing this like whole continuing to talk thing, it doesn't actually make your point, right?
I
and
can guarantee you, if we broke down the amount of time we spoke, I don't think I would be able to.
Stop. Man, stop. Right?
I've stopped. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Now, pointing out that there was a...
So, I mean, I don't think I have to point this out to anybody in chat, right? But names aren't indicative of any gender. You know what I mean? You could be a guy named Rose. You could be a girl named, you know, I don't know. Like it's like it's this is gender essentialism, right? This is fucking gender essentialism.
Law that was on the books in the past does not give you justification for what is going on today.
And I agree with that, and that's why I need to
I mean, I shouldn't even be feeding the troll.
get to that part and explain why I think that that's still a just explanation for things that are happening today. But I just need to get there. You said at the beginning that I need to be able to lay out my argument because I'm the one presenting something. I'm the one arguing an affirmative. So I just need to be able to lay out my entire argument.
So then,
then you
like,
can
you haven't
agree or
really
disagree with the
engaged
conclusion.
with
But yeah, from now on, whenever somebody comes in, their first statement is like transphobic, you feel free to ban them, like, you know, make a real ban. You don't have to do that as a timeout.
any of the things that I've said because it isn't specific to your dialogue tree, right?
Well, specifically, you asked me to present my argument on this given topic. And so far, even though we have talked about a bunch of things that were wholly unrelated, we have worked
They
through
actually
two out of
are
the, hold on.
related,
We have worked
right?
through two
They
out of
are in
five
fact
of the
related, and you agreed to that, right?
Okay. So they are okay. I'm gonna drop that. Put that aside for just a second. So we've worked through 2 points. Okay. So far we agree on the following 2 points. Number one, Black Americans experienced discrimination in the past. Number two, this
Oh my God,
discrimination
okay.
had an effect on their wealth levels. So we both agree on that. Let's get to the next point. Okay.
It's actually not true, right?
So you
In the past, it would have had the point that you would want to make, right? It's not that it had an effect on their wealth. It would have been had access to money, right? And that would have been by way of being able to take on debt, which is where
You
these
can be a guy
laws were
named
spoken
Destiny.
specifically
Thank
to.
you.
Once those laws
Thank
were
you,
struck down,
Ghastly. You
right?
can be a
This is
guy
where,
and
like,
be
the
named
argument
Destiny.
of the
It's
Federal
fine.
Reserve and actually pulling wealth out of the country, which
You
is
don't
what
have to
has been happening through
essentialize
inflation,
names, right?
is where the crux of this argument actually goes to, which is why I keep fucking nailing that home, because that's the fact.
You're not nailing shit, CTV.
so yes or no? Let's see if we can get a third flip flop on this.
You're
Do you
not
believe
nailing
that the
shit.
discrimination Black Americans face in the past had an effect on their wealth? Has a negative effect then on your wealth, if I'm going to be more specific.
Yeah, pronouns also not necessarily like
Hello?
they're not. There's not
Sorry,
a
I
one-to-one
have my mic
correspondence between
I
pronouns
would
and
say
gender
no.
either.
Okay, so now
Right.
we've gone from saying no to then you
Hold
saying
on.
yes for a second, and now we're going back to no. I don't
Right,
think
because
we're able to hold this
specifically, and
discussion.
that's why I pointed out that the law that was on the books, it was preventing
Okay.
people to have access to money or being able to take on debt is the thing specifically related here, right? Now, what you're trying to correlate that to is wealth, which is being pulled out of the country by the Federal Reserve, right, and from the people by way of taxes for a long and inflation for a long time, right?
Okay. I think I'm going to have to cut the discussion short here because you have flip-flopped 3 times on a statement I've given to you, worded pretty much exactly the same.
I can
all 3 times.
I can understand why you feel that way. I mean, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Okay.
That you've probably watched my content in the past. Is that
I've
correct?
seen you on a couple of panels. But I
Right.
realize now why I accepted this debate. The reason why I accepted this debate is because in the panels, I wasn't given enough time to see specifically the ridiculous lengths you tend to go to in conversations when there's a one-on-one back and forth. While in panels, there's less direct confrontations with individuals, so it's harder for me to attain really an understanding of how individuals and like debate specifically.
Rose wrist.
So I think specifically here, right, is what's happened is that you
I
came
am
into the
so
conversation
impressed.
thinking that there was going to be a limited
I am
amount of
so
knowledge that I had,
impressed.
and then
Good
once
job.
I'm
Good
able
job.
to
Hey, good
correlate
job.
the
Rose
ideas
wrist.
over the entire
Damn.
sphere of what we're talking about, you ultimately realized that you were just not prepared enough for the conversation, and now's the time
Well,
to
I
touch
was
on
never
run
even
before
given
you
the
make-
opportunity
That
to
was
lay out my
amazing.
entire
That was
argument.
really good
I know,
shit,
because
Rose.
you keep getting hung
Listen,
up on your dialogue tree because your dialogue tree is dependent.
You might not ever get on the Hippy Dippy, but you win. You are the Hippy Dippy champion of my heart. Okay, that was awesome. That was fucking awesome.
on me agreeing.
I have a question for you. Okay, how do I say this in a non-condescending way? So
And I mean that about not going on the Hippy Dippy. Like, pissing CTV off is a great way to get like blacklisted.
when people make an argument, do you recognize that there are a series of sort of assumptions or frameworks one has to operate under for the argument to make sense? Do you agree on this?
Not in all things, no.
Okay, can you give me an example of one argument a person could make that doesn't require any like assumptions or presuppositions or premises?
I think mainly on YouTube, but yeah, there may be. It looks like his YouTube channel's bigger though. Like,
doesn't depend upon any pre-arguments or suppos. Well, I got
Not
you.
necessarily arguments, it's premises.
I got
it's just called Rose Wrist, singular wrist.
you. I got you right.
Gotcha,
A
I'm
good
ready.
On
argument
YouTube.
here would be that, like, CTV is one of the sexiest men alive. All
Okay.
you have to do is look at me right now, and you can see it very clearly.
So for this to be the case, right, you would need to sort of establish what you would mean by sexy, correct? Because it's a highly subjective term, and it's something that has different meanings to different individuals, and there are different given traits that different
True.
individuals find sexy.
Based.
Additionally, you also need to
No,
specify if you're talking about
it's-
today, if you're talking
It's
about
when
a
you,
few years ago.
it's when you know something, right? I'm sexy and I know it.
Okay.
So
I
then,
think-
like at that
but
point,
that's
it
not an
actually doesn't
argument. That's
depend
just a
on what somebody
statement,
else's.
right? That's not an
Yeah,
argument.
but
Then.
right, but at that point, right, because it's my truth and that's the only truth that matters to me,
Uh-huh.
then I don't actually have to worry about what anybody else says in this thing where you would think that there's a presupposition, when in fact, right, like I'm just sexy and I know it.
I'm happy that we've gotten to the point in this conversation where you have sort of you have explained to the people watching through this sexy and I know it analogy that at the end of the day, you aren't really concerned in trying to breach some mutual understanding through logically progressing through an argument, and instead are more concerned about what you know is the case specifically, and then just leaving it at that, as a whole.
Yeah,
but
I can understand like your dialogue tree is falling apart.
This
because
isn't a dialogue tree. This is what needs to be done to make an argument. You need to establish the premises before the argument can make
This
sense.
is a dialogue tree. Do you know how many times I've had this argument?
It's only a dialogue tree, CTV, because you're bringing like nothing to the table. Like, there's a cogent argument that you're being faced with, and your response has been the Federal Reserve.
With lefties over the last 9 months?
Do you want to know how many times you've told me
No,
about the Federal
CTV,
Reserve in
no.
this conversation?
No.
And this is where
I don't think he really thinks he won the debate.
whenever you're specifically
There's some
referencing
people in
wealth,
his audience though that
this
will.
is where this conversation
That's the thing, is to be part of CTV's audience, you have to be dumber than CTV.
goes.
Also,
So prove
you're
your
aware that
point.
a
What is
dialogue
your-
tree, just calling
what
something a
is your-
dialogue tree is an argument against it, right? You can have a dialogue
what
tree
is-
that's perfectly
so
valid
what
and that is
is-
perfectly
What is
argumentatively
your
sound.
point? Get to the next things. I'm going to
Okay.
be quiet and lay it all out here.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna lay out my argument, and I have a feeling we're gonna have about 6 million
Oh
disagreements.
my
and
god,
disagreements
yo,
to work
I
with.
feel
Okay,
like,
so-
oh my
I'm
god.
probably going to
premises.
disagree with everything, but go
Well,
on.
I mean, it's possible that you disagree with anything.
Also,
and that
for
would be you
me,
flip-flopping for the fourth or fifth
I don't
time,
want
but
to argue
hope
with
at least
any.
you
I don't want to
disagree
do a
with things you
debate longer than
previously
an
agreed. So,
hour.
the 5 premises in my argument were that
Like,
number
you know,
one,
if you
and
want
I'm sure the
another
audience at
debate,
this
come
point
back,
is going to
right?
be
But
right?
like, let's do
That
an
Black
hour at a
Americans
time.
experienced
I don't know.
discrimination in the past.
I don't like these
Slavery,
like three. I
Jim
fucking
Crow,
hate these
being
long
second-class
form
citizens,
debates. They are
redlining, yada,
so
yada, all of that.
shitty.
Second thing is that discrimination had a dramatic effect on their wealth. So by virtue of being second-class citizens, by virtue of being redlined into bad districts, by virtue of your communities being over-policed, by virtue of having access to like worse education, you are then, on average, less likely to obtain more wealth than a comparative individual that had not had those barriers in front of them. Okay, that seems fairly agreeable. Point number 3 is that wealth gaps don't just solve themselves. And we see this, right, society. We see that wealth gaps, like especially ones that are fairly significant, don't just close themselves after 1 or 2 generations. This empirically is not the case. We just don't see this happening. Point number 4 is that the parent's wealth, so the wealth of your parent, is going to have an influence on the wealth you're going to be obtaining in your life. So for instance, if you have a wealthy parent that can afford to give you good education, good housing, send you to a good school, that treatment is going to make you more likely to be able to accumulate more wealth, right? This would make sense, and we went through the comparison with the school, right? And then we flip-flopped on that a couple times. The 5th point is that wealth garners you generalized advantages in society, right? So if you have more money, you're typically going to be better off. You're going to face less just discrimination, less maltreatment, less oppression, yada, yada, yada. Typically, just being wealthy is going to give you a better experience in society. And then my conclusion was going to be, because of the largely unaddressed racist treatments in the past, the Black Americans of today face relatively poor outcomes in the current day in comparison to other racial groups. So because Black Americans in the past were subjected to bad treatment, that left them less wealthy than their white counterparts. And the current Black people we have in America today are the descendants of those Black people, whose then parents would be worse off economically, which would influence the child to be worse off economically, and that would sort of perpetuate itself on an aggregate scale. And that's the sort of argument I was trying to lay out here.
So what specific argument are you making for this disparity to be happening to justify the numbers that you're seeing today?
Can you reword that?
What is the specific example that you would use to justify the numbers that you are seeing today?
So there is
Just
no one
divide
specific
the
example. There is no
numbers?
cause and effect
Wait.
like directly. There are a compilation of cause and effects, but I'm not going to be here and say, oh, redlining, there you go, yada yada, everything explained, right? There are a
Oh,
wide
that's what
range
he
of different
wants,
effects.
is one
One of
simple
these things
answer.
is something that
Yeah.
you love talking about, right? It would be the drug war. So you know,
Yeah.
by virtue of Black Americans being generally in a worse economic situation than white Americans, the drug war had a disparate effect on them compared to white Americans. They were more hurt by that. They were more likely to engage in criminal behavior, more likely to, you know, like consume and, you know, maybe just generally spread
Yeah,
drugs
like
around
the
in the
idea
community.
that
Would be one
somebody's
effect that would
supposed to
explain part of
catch
this
up
disparity. Another would be redlining.
when they start
Another
off
would be hiring
behind,
discrimination. Another would be lack
even
of
with the
education.
perfect
And they all
conditions,
sort of
even if you
together
did
on an
somehow
aggregate
solve
form the general
racism,
disparity we
like
see.
with
It's
the
not like
law,
one thing
just
leads
like
to all
no,
of this.
you know, it
It's
doesn't
a
happen.
collection of
No
different
social
racially disparate treatments
discrimination,
that has
no
led to the disparity we see
financial
today.
discrimination,
So I find it
no,
exceedingly, I don't know,
you know, no anything. It's
I
all
don't know what the
gone.
right word here is.
Even
right?
with that, like, how
Exceedingly
do you expect,
convenient for you that there's a
like,
point in the
given the fact that
conversation
we said
whenever
that
you are
wealth
more than willing
builds
to
on
look outside
itself,
of, say, like
it
this
kind
narrow
of takes
box
some
or this
wealth
very broad
to
brush to a narrow
build some
box that you're
wealth.
attempting to
So,
paint
yeah,
when it
no,
comes
this
to
is
the
fucked
things
up.
that would be affecting things like wealth, right? Specifically, though, right?
So
The
hold
war
on.
on drugs has
Can I
had.
correct you for a minute, because what you just said, your characterization of something I said,
Did I
wasn't
not just
entirely
listen
accurate.
to? I just.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's
you
one thing.
said
That's
some
me
shit.
presenting. Yeah, but that's me
Listen,
presenting my argument. That's not me
listen,
characterizing what
listen,
you're saying,
listen,
right? That's a bit different.
listen,
Because I can guarantee you what you're about to say right now is not going to apply to anything that I believe in. So that's why I want to correct you to give you the opportunity to give one that will apply.
Listen. Are you listening now? Okay,
Uh,
you just said a whole bunch of shit that I didn't agree
You're about
with.
to waste a few
and
minutes.
You just wasted a few minutes of talking, and I listened. I gave you the floor. I didn't say anything. You said shit I didn't agree with,
Yeah,
and now
but
it's my turn.
do you recognize
to
that there's a
talk,
difference
right?
between saying
I
things
really
I don't
Do
agree
you
with and
recognize that I have
characterizing
chat
things
in a
that-
way
Do you
that I didn't
recognize that I have the
expect?
mic?
I recognize that both of us possess mics because we're not on a
Okay.
stage.
Are you recognizing that I
Nice
have the
mic,
mic?
by the way.
If not, then like you can continue to talk, understand
Uh-huh.
that I don't agree,
Okay.
right? And if the whole point of you interrupting me is so that you can say that you didn't
His
agree with
program
something,
stopped
then I should have
working.
interrupted you that entire fucking time. You doing that is in fact disrespectful.
Oh, there is a moderator.
I
Yeah,
apologize.
that's what's weird is like that like they Rose Rust mentioned that there was a moderator, I think on CTV's side somewhere, but like I don't know, we're not hearing them. Maybe they're in the, I don't know, where would they be? Maybe they're typing in Discord? I don't know, chat. I don't know. If there is a moderator, I haven't heard them speak up.
If that was interpreted as disrespectful. All I wanted to do was correct.
Wait,
your
there's two
interpretation of my
moderators?
argument so that you
Wait.
can-
Please tell me that it's middle guy and middle girl. Is it middle guy and middle girl? Is that who's moderating?
more specifically address what I'm saying in a way that we
That
don't
right
waste a bunch of
there.
time.
Oh my goodness.
So
Oh my goodness.
you said that I was trying to explain just wealth in general and the cause and effect things that lead to an individual's wealth. That is
What I
not
said
what I'm
was-
explaining. I'm trying to
what
explain the
I-
cause and effects that led to the
Oh my
disparity
God.
between racial groups in wealth. And now
So
you may
just
continue
don't
with your
stop.
point.
So now you just don't stop. Now I may continue.
Yes.
Use language like that again, son, and we're going to have a whole different conversation here in about 15 seconds. You hear me?
What is this ageism? Damn. Are you threatening me
What
with
was
what?
the language?
did you hear me?
What was said?
Did you
What
hear
was
me?
What are you
said?
threatening me with? I'm curious. Can you say the quiet part out loud?
Asshole.
Are you listening?
Oh yeah, yo. If
Yeah,
you
I'm
really
listening. I'm
wanna,
curious. What kind of
Okay,
conversation
I'm
will we have in
glad
15
you're.
seconds?
if you really want to piss him off when he's being super pedantic, call him daddy.
I'm glad you're listening. Right?
Especially if he's gonna be like, young man, like fucking call that asshole daddy.
This is where the mute button comes out, and this is how I know that you're listening at this point. Right? This interrupting stuff, this you don't agree with stuff. I get it. You've been saying stuff that I
I've been
don't agree
Interrupt me more, daddy.
with, by the way.
Mute me harder, daddy.
right? I didn't sit here and interrupt you. I gave you the floor, right, for you to be able to talk, even though you said things that I didn't agree with. That being said, I'm going to continue my point, and when I'm finished with my point, I will unmute you. Okay? Now, what I said is that it's convenient for you to want to agree to broader things, but then when I bring up the very specific,
He's bullying. Well, why is he got power? Why has he got the power to bully anyone in the first place? Why has he got more than 5 viewers, chat? What's the whole reason? What's the whole reason that CTV is a word that we're even saying?
language of the Federal Reserve, which has been pulling wealth out of the nation for a while, right? That you would not engage with that, but then not use redlining as your example, right? For the reason why these things happened.
Crybaby television. I like that.
And like, now that we're like 2 minutes into this complete interruption, now I don't even have all
Oh,
of my
cry bully television. I see.
thoughts together, right? And this is exactly why you had the floor. and then I had the floor, and then you interrupted me. Now, you're unmuted now, because now we're completely off
CTV,
topic
you're
because
not
of your
doing it
interruption.
right. You're not doing it right. You have to send him to the Shadow Realm.
So lay out the rest of whatever it is that you're saying.
All right.
And we'll
Like I
go
did with
again.
Dylan.
Don't repeat yourself.
That was my
So
original
what
sin,
you
chat,
said
was
there,
sending
and the reason
Dylan to
why I
the
interrupted you is
Shadow
because You
Realm.
made the statement that
The
it is
debate
very
bros did not
convenient
like
for
me
you to wanna
sending
talk about these
Dylan to
broad,
the Shadow
general
Realm after he was
effects that predict
defeated
an
on the
individual's
battlefield of
life.
ideas. But
And
I
that
didn't
is
know what
not
else to
I'm
do with
talking
him.
about at all. What
Just
I am
send him to
talking
the
about
Shadow Realm.
are
I'm sorry,
the,
Dylan.
like, direct effects that have contributed
You
to
worthless
the
motherfucker,
racial
get the fuck off
disparity
my
in
platform.
wealth levels. Right? So the Federal Reserve argument is an excellent discussion to have if we're discussing aggregate economic outcomes of all American citizens. However, in the context of discussing racial discrepancies, it doesn't have a purpose there because it's something that affects the entirety of the population of the United States in a fairly similar way. While the things I mentioned previously, redlining, Jim Crow, second-class citizenship, all the things, the drug war, are things that disparately affected one racial group to another. And that's why I wanted to interrupt you before you talked about the Federal Reserve thing again, because it doesn't have to do with the discussion we're having, which is
God
about
damn
racial
it, chat.
disparities,
If I was
not
on
about
more
just overall wealth
Adderall, would I
gaps or
sound like
overall
this?
Right. So it doesn't have anything to do with the conversation for you. We've already established that that is in fact the case, right? So since it doesn't have anything to do with you, you don't think it's important, right?
That is, in fact, exactly what I just said. And I
Okay.
think
So
I
I'm
think
glad
you,
that you're right. I'm glad we agree, right? So because it's not important to you, this is where whenever I'm sitting here and trying to illustrate the point as to why this
I
specific
feel like
thing
he's just
has affected
regurgitating
everyone
points that
to
he's
pull
gotten
the wealth
clapped
out of the
with.
country, right? This is why there's a
CTV,
distinction
was that a
between money
Demon
and
Mama
wealth.
point?
This is why I pointed this out from the very beginning.
Is that
This
a way
exactly
that
why your
Demon Mama
dialogue
owned
tree
you at
falls
some
apart,
point?
because now if you were having a good faith discussion where you have your terms, I understand where your terms are, I laid out my terms and you should be able to understand where my terms are, then at some point there should be a melding, right? But the fact of the matter is that because your argument is laid out very specifically along the lines of this dialogue tree that you have, and you are not capable of being able to think outside of that box to understand how these things went
That
together.
Anglo box,
At
he
this
is.
point, it's
He's
like,
been listening to
I feel like you
Infrared.
need a little bit more
Chat,
education before you're trying to engage in this topic.
chat. CTV
yeah,
got
I
he
think
got
it's
gorilla
about time
pilled.
to call this discussion to call
He's
it off.
part of the
I mean,
gorilla
I'm
army.
sorry for being too
CTV's
specific
a
to
dude,
the
a
topic,
naspel now. Oh
subject
my
of
god,
this general
what
debate.
was
I find
that?
it fairly funny that you critique me for having a lack of education on the topic when you are unfamiliar with the wealth gaps between racial groups. That feels like a fairly sort of critical aspect of information to have when discussing
Hey, be
systemic
careful.
racism.
Hey,
he's put me in the
listen.
waiting room.
Pointing out somebody's ignorance in a debate you just defeated them, and if they're a bigger streamer, that could be dangerous. That can have some negative ramifications, right?
Yeah, he just kicked.
Because there's winning the debate, and then there's winning the PR war that you start after losing the debate.
Me out. I also, for those of you maybe watching, I also found it really funny when you threatened me with what could potentially be violence. Peak of
Wait, what did CTV say? Okay, you're right. That actually did sound kind of rough. Like, now, I don't think that's TOS-able or anything like that, but that actually did sound like that. So there's a difference between, like, somebody that says, listen, if you're going to do content against me, I'm going to come after you too, right? If you take that statement, like Eris did to me, and say, oh, she said she's going to physically harm me, you're a incredibly dishonest person. Monumentally dishonest person, right? But the thing that CTV said, even though maybe it might not fall into the rubric of TOS, like, that is something that would, to most people, sound like, I don't know, let's not get into this Riley Gershong, what is the average reasonable person or something like that, you know, that Riley always uses, but, like, I don't know, chat. I feel like that came a lot closer to, like, an explicit threat. Like, that's something that would actually you'd worry about. And you can see how this debate politics scumbag realm functions. There's no price paid for standing segregation.
what's it called? Critically thinking veteran there. Okay, threatening a 17-year-old online with violence. Because you have a political disagreement with him. Oh boy.
I mean, I guess, like, the argument then becomes, like, you know, you could make an argument that, like, you think what the person was thinking was violence. Like, I kind of don't think you should be able to do what CTV just did, but I don't think that it's necessarily against TOS. I just think it makes you a bad person. But we already knew this about CTV. Yeah, this is pretty cool.
Peak of conservative intellectuals here on the
Oh my god.
Critically Thinking Veterans show.
Well done, well done. Kind of amazing, chat. Kind of amazing.